Hi friends, welcome to yet another session of NITCO Talks. We again have four fantastic architects and designers with us, and we are today going to see their amazing works once we get going. Introducing the lady first, Nisha Alwani, along with her partner Shruti Jalan, established NSA Architecture and Interiors. Their experimental and pragmatic approach has helped the firm evolve into a dynamic design practice with its own language and principle. Their practice is dedicated to provide optimal solutions that result in functionality, aesthetically and economically built environments tailored to fulfill requirements of their clients. Welcome, Nisha.
Thank you.
Zubin Master, our rock star, having started his career 29 years ago, is the co-founder, along with Ruby Khanna and Suleiman Banji, of Design Matrix Interiors, a studio that offers interior design solutions. They strive for perfection in every project they undertake, following a theory of never saying no to any kind of work, has given them a variety of projects ranging from residential, commercial, hospitality, and theaters. Welcome, Zubin. Rajan Goregaonkar, along with his wife Ritu, his brother Sachin, and his wife Shami, are partners at GA Design. He graduated from JJ College of Architecture in 1990. With extensive experience in residential and commercial buildings, township projects, as well as interiors of luxury homes and offices in and around Mumbai, Rajan is recognized as one of Mumbai's leading architects. Rajan brings together the design expertise of both architecture and interior design in projects. Welcome, Rajan.
Thank you.
And finally, and not the least, is Proneet Nath, whose family I have known for a long time, and my father was friends with Mr. Prem Nath forever. Set up his own practice, Urban Studio, with his charming wife, Amisha Thanawala. Urban Studio is an office of young architects that operate as a collective, collaborative of multiple expertise. Currently, with a team of 25 architects and interior designers, Urban Studio is successfully handling projects of varied scales in different sectors of residential, commercial, hospitality, retail, and institutional, with several local and international publications featuring their work. Welcome, Proneet. We are now going to see work of the architect. Maybe we can start with Nisha. Would you?
Sure.
Yeah, thanks.
I'll share my screen.
Yeah.
With So I'm going to talk about this apartment, which is very dear to my partner and me. That's because this is her own residence. It's called Apartment by the Sea because this is in South Bombay on Malabar Hill. And it's in a high-rise building. It's a 3-bedroom. It was originally a 3-bedroom apartment in a high-rise building. And it's got an ocean view on 3 sides. So when you're in the apartment, you actually feel like you're in a cruise ship. So I'm going to take you through, our design philosophy here. So what Shruti wanted was a bright, airy, spacious home. And she had a few pieces of mid-century modern furniture. So this was the basis on which we designed the apartment. Our philosophy and principles were very simple. We wanted to create a space which was very neutral, with clean lines and a neutral palette. So your material palette comprises of white marble floors, open grain oak wood wall paneling, and we've done a lime plaster, like a stucco treatment on the walls. I'm going to take you guys through the plan. So you can follow my arrow. Here is the entrance. And you come into this large space, which is the living room. The living room connects with the den, which was the third bedroom. So the third bedroom we got away with, and we created a den. So this can be opened up and the space can flow into each other during times of entertainment when you have larger groups of people. So when you enter, you have this corridor right across, and the wall that you see where the cursor is going along, it has entrances to the kitchen and to the bedroom doors. So the entire wall has been paneled with an oak wood veneer. So the doors and the paneling are all flush. So you have the kitchen here on the top left with the service area. You have the children's bedroom. And then towards the end is the master bedroom, which has, views of the ocean on two sides. So this is the first slide. So this is the living room. And like I said, the floors are in white marble. The walls are white. The shell is neutral. And our basic instinct here was to harness from the environment natural light and ventilation. So the windows were much smaller when we inherited the apartment. So we've dropped the sills and we've expanded the windows to let in more light and ventilation. So all through the apartment, you have infinite views of the ocean. This is another view of the living room. Here you see the entrance on the far left. And on the right of the dining is where you see the den. Now we've got these very fine slatted screens, which are sliding panels. So you will see that in various parts of the house, these screens open up and expand the space as and when required. And when you close them, it offers the privacy to the rooms. So the den that you see on the right, it doubles up as a guest bedroom when required, or is used as a living room, lounge, entertainment space as and when required. So this is the dining table on the left, and on the right you see the bar, which is, some of the pieces are in mid-century modern style, and some of them are, we didn't need to make them, we just revived some of the pieces that she had. So the screen creates a lantern effect in the evenings when you see the light coming through it. That's an open position, and that's the lounge area where, you can play games, watch television. There's a study back there. This is from the inside looking back onto the living room. This is the master bedroom. So the master bedroom, we decided to have the bed floating so that it's closer to, the beautiful ocean views. And we've got a low console that gives you uninterrupted views of the ocean. We didn't want any obstruction. Even all the railings in the house are in glass. So that's the screen at the back, which conceals the walk-in wardrobe. And the oak wood paneling continues at the back. This is the son's room. And we've created a grid pattern in his room on the wardrobe, on the bathroom door, on the bookcase. So this grid pattern follows through. And then you have the kitchen on the left. Of course, the flooring in the kitchen is different from the rest of the house. We've used like a charcoal slate finish tile, which is more durable. And the lines are clean. The same material palette continues in the kitchen. On the shutters is the oak wood. And this is the corridor that leads to the bedroom. Basically, the corridor was long and narrow. So to give it width, we've got a niche in black mirror, which is rather reflective. And, it helps double up the space. That's the end of the presentation.
That was fantastic.
Thank you.
Fantastic, Nisha. Let's get the screen out. You want to leave the screen on in case somebody wants to ask some question?
Nisha, this is Land's End, right?
Yes, you're right. Yeah, that is Land's End.
Yeah, beautiful property.
Yes, it is. It is. It's
Love,
got fantastic.
lovely space.
Literally, you
Lovely
feel like
space.
you're in a cruise ship when you're
Yeah,
in
you're right.
apartment,
You're
because
right.
it's got, you know, uninterrupted, infinite views of the ocean.
Apt name for the building.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, it's like literally on a peninsula sort of landmass.
Yeah. Nice
Should
clean lines also.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, that's why we continuously, she wanted a bright, spacious, and open house. So we kept the shell very neutral, you know.
Yeah.
So should I stop sharing the screen?
Yes, please.
All right.
We can move on to Proneet. You'd like.
Just 1 second. Yeah, can you see? Yeah. So this is just some current work that we're doing in this lockdown. This is a commercial building in Chennai, which is over another mall that we've done in Chennai as well. As a Palladium Mall. So essentially, it's an office building, and I don't know what will happen to it now, whether it'll actually go through or when, but that's the design now. And we essentially didn't want to do away with the curtain wall, right? I mean, the typical curtain wall that most commercial buildings in India have, and make it a more tropical building where you can actually open windows and stuff like that. But of course, there's an FSI problem and the bylaws and all that, and there's a loophole in the sense that we used where basically instead of having a refuge floor, every couple of floors, every 8 meters and stuff, you can have like a fire deck on every floor, and that also became like a landscape deck beside the fire deck that happened. So, kind of using that on every alternate floor to kind of generate a more living facade that works. So the whole idea was to have like an office space that actually looks out into a more green space. And it is a very simple grid system. But there are the nice thing about this is there are no curtain walls. So it saves a lot on the cost of, there's no performance glass needed because it's like a 2.4 meter deck. So it's a 2.4 meter setback that accommodates all the green. So that was just some of the. So this is just some current work that we're doing, and this is the building that sits over, which is again done by us, which is a mall, which is where we did the architecture, interiors, and here unlike.
Can you talk a little louder?
Yeah, sorry. So unlike the building on top which we are doing, which is a very open building, this is a mall which is a very closed-in building because of retail environments. There's no kind of windows needed, and we just had to the facade had to be emotive in terms of the luxury that it contains inside. So we kind of did like a tufted, tessellated facade in zinc. Which is more attuned to like a tufted bag, luxury bag. So these were just some of the views for that. So it just kind of has a very rhythmic geometry to have that emotion of the lux factor that it kind of portrays in, that needs to portray. Also the same language in terms of what a luxurious space is works towards the interiors, but in a simple way. So this is just when you get frisked for security, which going forward now will have many layers now for other things as well. But so instead of having the usual curtain for the women and all of that, there's just like it's almost like a sculptural kind of a piece that you walk into, and then you have full visual security for where you get frisked, or where you get checked and then go. So throughout the mall as well, in terms of for us, it was the luxury was also about just what you see in terms of the cleanliness of space. So all the services of the mall, including signage, ACs, smoke detectors, speakers, all of that. Normally in a commercial building, you see all of that. Everything that comes into an 8-inch strip, all of it. So the ceilings become very clean. There's only very simple bounce light, and all of it go. All the services get condensed into that 8-inch strip, continuous strip that runs throughout the. So we also have reflective ceilings that reflect all the movement that goes below in the mall. So if I'm wearing like a blue shirt, I'll have this watery kind of reflection on top. And as I move, or 100 people move, you have this kind of reflection that follows you. So it's a more animated kind of space with different densities at different times. So that was just some of the details. So it was just, it just kind of portrayed very elegant, easy lux without using really rich materials. Again, the flooring is done in triangulated pattern because of getting different lots of marbles from different suppliers, which became a hassle as well. To match the price. And then we did some of the interiors. There's also a clubhouse within that space. For the residents on top for another building. Here we used one singular material, which is actually all the packing crates for Palladium. So all the elevators that came for these projects and for all the other projects. So all our material became free of cost. We just used this packing material, which is OSB board, and basically use that in a striated curved space, just to kind of break the monotony of a regular commercial space with columns and capitals and all of that. So this is just one move and one geometry that kind of modulates and curates the space and different divisions of the space. So yeah, this is just some of the current work that's happening. Yeah, that's it.
Amazing work, Pranit. Absolutely amazing. I wanted to ask you one question. In the commercial building, does every floor have a space outside where you have greenery?
Yeah, so every alternate floor has a space outside, which is a 2.48 feet space. Out of that, 4 feet is the walkway, and 4 feet is the planter for them.
So I think in Mumbai, I don't think they allow this.
No. So they don't allow this anywhere. So what happens is that this is a rule. Nobody allows it, and nobody's going to let go of that much area. So, but it's actually a fire deck. So as per the NBC, at every floor you can put 10% of the floor area, or for 2 floors, 10% of every 2 floors. So that can be like a fire deck instead of having a big chunk of a refuge floor. That happens. So the whole idea is that you have a hidden agenda, right? We have to work with the laws and have a hidden agenda of still doing a building like this within our context.
And I have a question. You can run your services along that deck, right? Like around the periphery?
Yeah. So our whole intent was to run all our services over there.
Right.
And also the whole idea is also that, you always stuff, especially relevant now, because we started doing this just at the beginning of this lockdown. And anyway, we didn't want to do a regular glass building in our context now, especially now that, you don't want to be stuck in an AC'd environment through the day.
Right.
You need to be able to open your windows and all of that. So this system is actually cheaper than a regular. You have to do a cost comparison as well to be able to sell this, and it's actually almost half the price of a regular, well-maintained, well-designed curtain wall facade that you see in BKC or any of the big commercial buildings.
And it's also not a heat trap, like you said.
Of course, that's the whole point. So the greenery as well
And it gives
controls.
you that release. It gives you that
Yeah, yeah.
real release as well.
It also offers a release from inside out and also from outside in. So,
Yeah.
I mean, if there are a lot of residents around, it's in a very densely packed area of Chennai. So, all the residents around also don't look into this glass
Dead
building,
wall.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That you see, you're also looking at green. So it's also living green. So right now, we've just shown this in our views currently as just green, but there's a whole science to this. It can be hydroponic systems. You can grow a lot of stuff. It's actually living, breathing facade. So
Right.
that was the whole idea of this thing. A lot of precedents to this in the world. I mean, Jeffrey Bawa did it first in the Kandalama Hotel in Sri Lanka.
Correct.
There's a beautiful building in Milan that has done that for a residential building. But I mean, the whole challenge for us was to do it here in our context. That was the thing.
This is Praneeth's Bosco Vertical.
Yeah, Bosco
Yes.
Vertical, of course. I've stayed there for like a day. So,
Wow. Nice project. I hope it gets built the way you've conceived it, bro.
Yes.
yeah. Let's see.
Okay.
Okay, great. We can now move on to Rajan.
Yeah. Let Praneeth start.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like Mr. Tulwar explained, we are GA Design, and we are 4 of us. So it's me, my brother Sachin, Ritu, and Shami. And we are doing a lot of projects of different types: residential buildings, interiors, commercial buildings, and I thought I could take you through a few of our projects which we are currently doing. So this is one project which we are doing at Dombivli, which is just about 40 kilometers from Mumbai. It's about 50 lakh square feet, and it's got about 23 towers of 23 floors. And we thought that in a building like this, it's more important to kind of have a lifestyle change for the residents. So we kind of focused on the amenity, which is the club out here, which is it's a very large club. It's about, and it forms like a kind of a central focal point in this entire complex. It's around about 80,000 square feet. And you can see, like, we tried to kind of give it a fluid design and merge the levels into each other with steps and finally connect it all to the ground. And we've done this interesting feature where there is this round gym, which is about 60 feet in dia and is suspended. It's supported on columns on a swimming pool which goes underneath. So this is also a part of the same complex. It's actually the sales office, which is also in a very large size because of the project itself. And yeah, so in this, actually the interesting part was that we took this large 6-meter canopy, and then we were actually custom made about 650 lights, which kind of give this, a very jewel kind of look in the night, and it gives you that glam which you need for a sales office. This is part of the interiors of the sales office. So we made it about 6 meters in height and give that kind of volume and space, to give that kind of grand feeling. This is some of the interiors of that project, where most of the design has this concept of angular lines and faceted elements. So we kind of repeated that throughout, and it also kind of flows in the buildings. So you have these dead surfaces on the side of the buildings where you really can't take a window because of regulations. So you've treated them with this kind of a parametric pattern which moves around the entire complex. Yeah, so apart from residential, yeah, this is a commercial building which we have done in Pune. And you can see out here, it's also kind of a ribbon-shaped design where each floor flows into the other. And in Pune, you have this regulation where you can take balconies, double-height balconies, which are not counted in FSI. So we kind of use that as a design element. So they work as a breakout space as well as, an interesting part of the design. This is another commercial building in Pune itself where we've used glass, different colored glass in the facade to make it interesting. Yeah, and this is what we're doing right now. We were actually working on this in the lockdown. So this is a building in Wakad where it's actually the plot is such that the entrance is a kind of an acute angle. So we had to create an entrance from that acute corner, and we were wondering what to do out there to make that entrance interesting at the same time monumental. So we actually hit on this idea where we took the entire building and supported the commercial building on top on a big column down, and automatically it gave us that very interesting architectural feature as well as an interesting entrance to the project. And also some standalone houses we do. So these are a few. There is this in Khandala, which is called Hillcrest, and it's got more of a feature where because there are heavy rains out there, so it was like very important that we wanted to create a porch where you get off from the car during the rains but don't get wet. So yeah, we made that into a feature in this house. And then there is this house which we call the Infinity House, and we call it Infinity because it's got an infinity pool. So here, like you can see, we've kind of created this dramatic composition where the master bedroom is supported on columns with a swimming pool which flows underneath that, and a semi-outdoor space gets created under this cantilevered master bedroom. Yeah, so this is another view of the same house, and that's what we try to do out here: just connect the outdoors to the indoors and keep the language very contemporary. Yeah, so that's it. That's some of our projects which we are doing recently, which are going on. Thank you. Seeing.
That was superb, Rajan.
Thank you.
Amazing stuff. Amazing stuff. I'm sure there will be lots of questions from the audience for all of you on your work. It's all amazing stuff.
Yeah.
And
lovely stuff, Rajan.
Yeah, thank you. So we try to kind of find some kind of an identity or an element in every project, and so that it becomes unique at the same time functional, and yeah.
And your styles are quite varied.
Yes, because I did show you different projects, and yes, but like in houses, sometimes what happens is you have clients who also, in many ways, are detrimental in what approach you take. So sometimes clients might not want a second home which looks like which has smooth walls and white marble. You might want a house which is completely, exposed and rough. So we work with both, and we just try to find a good design, good energy in the design. That's what's important.
Right.
Thank you.
Well done.
Very nice, Rajan.
Thank you.
Zubin, all yours.
Okay. So I'm also going to break the rules a little bit. We're going to try to show you projects that we thought were photographed well. They're mostly our earlier works, and we just like the project photography for correct framing or capturing nice reflections, capturing natural elements correctly. I mean, this was like a mango wadi in Alibag where like the trees were all drooping because they were too old. So there was literally no land space left because the trees had just taken over the entire property.
Whose place?
Lonavla.
What?
Sorry,
Galibag, whose house is that?
that was Mr. Kamal Murarka. You want to call him?
You're frightened.
Right, I'll keep going. Yeah, just some moods that were captured well while doing our site photography is what our theme is right now. I mean, look at the quality of the water that he's captured. I mean, it's almost mirror-like in an open space. Even if I rendered it, it wouldn't come so flat. This was a little wellness clinic that we did in Khar, which is called Nourish, and we applied a Kyoto theory to it, old Japanese woody theory to it. That's one of our favorite spots to party in. It's a friend's terrace in Bandstand. Amazing views of the ocean. And that's all of Juhu behind that twisted driftwood. That's all of Juhu behind. So there's also a stunning spot to be in Sandhu Palace. And this was a wall that we did out of chips, and it just became the main lighting for the outdoor space on this penthouse pool deck. Just some nicer indoor images captured by them. So they don't really tell you about the whole design. It's just an artistic capture of whatever we've designed. So there's partial panels got into it. This is another favorite project of ours with cement pattern design tiles and the concrete effect plaster on the walls. So our photography is mainly done by Prashant Bhatt, but we've also been using Sebastian and recently, I forget his name. Yeah, some of these shots are just like, with the greens and the paneling behind, it just kind of captivates the mood correctly. So these luxury bathrooms with these massive green courtyards outside are my favorite. Like you just feel like you're doing an outdoor bath, but actually it's completely covered. This angle I particularly like because it captures the entire 60-foot long corridor at this club that we did. And that's one of my favorite rooms in that club. It's the Scorsese meeting lounge. Also, this one's a favorite, but the way he's captured it from the outside the room was quite fun. The showroom was interesting for us because it was like, I think, 100-year-old cotton mill in Lower Parel, and we managed to dig out a space for a mezzanine and stuck with the old roofs and skylights. Oh, and contrastingly, this vanishing point photograph was also quite cool, I thought. And just the way he's captured our grayscale with the colors is what we like about these pictures with the parasol roofs. And a couple of these shots just capture our junction design theories very well. So I like this one. I like this one a lot because it's got the L-shaped of the veneer with the L-shaped of the burgundy roof and the grey wood. all interlocking into each other nicely. Yep, so that was it.
So, whom do we attribute these fantastic designs to?
Mostly my partners, because I normally stay on site and follow the instructions.
Very nice, Zubin.
Lovely
Nice.
variety, Zubin.
Sorry,
Amazing,
sorry,
man.
sorry
Lovely
for the
variety.
melange. Sorry for the melange, but these are really some of our earlier works, and we really like those works because they have a nice emotional connect with us. So I just thought that, I've done some of my other presentations before, and I thought we'd do something earlier this time.
Nice.
I think
Nice, very nice.
early or latest, it doesn't matter. Actually, what is good is always good. Good design always is timeless, I think.
Absolutely.
Your voice has gone off.
Is it better now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm saying that all of us try to aim for timeless, but we don't know what's going to make it happen for us on each project, right? What
Yeah.
feature is going to make it timeless?
You're
But
right.
that's always our aim.
So the very fact that you do a project which is probably an older project, but after many years, you love it. It just proves, that, it has stood the test of time. It's not just like a one-day thing, where it made an impact and now,
Yeah.
it's late anymore.
Hopefully the clients think the same way as us.
Good design always works.
Thank you, Vivek.
Ruby jumped to your defense saying that Zubin's very humble.
No. I only speak the truth. They are my real bosses.
Okay, we get to a few questions. Now, this challenges faced by architects and designers. First question for Nisha. Do you believe that designers should have a fixed design style to be successful, or can vary with different projects?
So, my take on this is human beings are multi-dimensional creatures with individual characteristics, right? So we are varied tastes. We don't eat the same, we don't dress the same, we don't live the same. And on that premise, every client and every project is different. They come with different aspirations, their different likes, dislikes. So we may rationalize a particular design, or it may be born out of instinct. Our style symbolizes philosophy at the end of it. So while the design principles and techniques can be the same throughout a variety of projects, styles may vary from project to project. And it depends on, the cultural references or environmental factors. It's the lifestyle and the choice of the client, or even it can be context driven. So basically, I believe in a variable approach for every project rather than a consistent approach across all projects. Because at the end of the day, design to me is a process and it is not an end result. What may work for me and what is successful in one project may not necessarily be successful in another. So that's my take on it.
But Nisha, can I interject?
Sure.
The grades, and maybe Pranit and Rajan can pipe in about this. The grades like the FLWs of the world, they had that one design philosophy that they followed.
Yes.
Like even the Jeffrey Bavas of the world. I mean, he has the colonnade in mind. He has that blur between inside outside. He has that courtyard. The greats of the world, which I have to say are becoming fewer and fewer as times go by.
Right.
But they always had that singular philosophy in their design concepts. No, Pranit?
Agreed, but it's also program related, right? So, for example, I mean, even if you see Charles Correa's work, right, or even Baba's work, or as you said, so many works, it's very difficult. It's actually very nice actually to have that language and to develop it, and you can see the language develop from the early works towards the later works as well. But that's all in similar programs. The moment programs change, then you can see that there is some kind of a dichotomy. So I mean, even if you see Charles Correa's works, right? I mean, the moment he did like an LIC building in Delhi, right, where he had to do a commercial building and a glass with a space frame and all. I mean, you really thought that, okay, I mean, it really isn't all of what Korea could do, right? I mean, in that sense. So it's very difficult to change that language or adapt that language from the moment your program or your context changes.
Right.
So in that sense, I think it's important to develop a language or to be able to switch your language, right? I mean, it's almost like speaking different languages. I'm not saying that for every project it has to be different for the sake of being different, but some projects demand that the language changes a bit, right? So in that sense, that's what I think here. But obviously, going back, I mean, it's actually great, and it's actually a luxury today, especially some of you guys who are specializing in residential or have the same kind of projects again and again. You can really hone your own language from project to project, which is great. But I mean, if you were to do a building, then or something else, or change the program, change the scale, then you would have to kind of slightly change your language, and therefore your style, so to speak.
There are some designers, like say for instance Zaha Hadid and Daniel Libeskind, who have completely broken the mold. So like Zubin, you were saying, those are the greats, and I don't think there are many, but who have achieved that that signature design, which they can they can just when you look at that building, that this is done by Zaha Hadid. It could be a commercial or residential, it could be anything, so like that there are few, not many.
Yeah.
Again,
But
yeah,
don't
but
want to
again,
comment.
sorry. So again, like saying you said Zaha, Libeskind or whatever, right? But again, like honestly, again, this is personal. Again, but for me, I mean, to do for a Zaha's airport or Zaha's big commercial building or a hotel, great. But to see the Zaha villa compared to like a Bawa villa or compared to some a more humane villa to live in or a house, it just seems a little bit forced. Because that language is so strong, you have to follow that language. You have to follow the language in every program. So for me, that feels a little forced. So that's in that sense. Would you rather live in a Zaha villa or a Jeffrey Bawa villa, right? I mean, So I'm not saying, of course, there's a huge difference as well, but I'm just saying that same style, I mean, the same language has to be tweaked slightly because that program scale changes. It can't be forced into that.
Guys, I want to read something that's come up on the chat from Vivek Gupta, our friend. He says it's called ISM, where your design philosophy remains constant. It just keeps evolving in the same vocabulary and they master it. Thereafter, people go to them for that very ISM or vocabulary of design, which I think has captured it perfectly.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, people will come to Pranit because he designs in a certain way. Like you can tell a Pranit Nath project, right from the days of Sejo, I could tell that this is done by Pranit.
Yeah, I mean, that happens to all of us. But there's also some kind of, I mean, there's also a strife where you try and not do that, right? I mean, from project to project, you're always trying to do something, in terms of program or material, or you're trying to do that. So, for example, there are other greats. I mean, if you see Rem Koolhaas's work, from early work to new work, or MVR TV, they've really switched modes in certain projects. They've really kind of gone because it's not about the style for them, but for them it's about programmatic thinking or approaching the whole design from a certain viewpoint. So for them, that's what it is. And of course, people who know them, who know their work, will know. But for most people who will not know it's the same architect. Like for non-architects, everyone will know this is a Zaha building, but they won't know that for other architects that this is also say a Rem's building or someone else.
I think it's also got to do a lot with personality of each architect, and I think that personality kind of it reflects in the in the design of that person's projects, how he perceives the energies which happen after he designs a building. So,
Yeah, exactly. So sometimes sometimes it's not like Zaha would be personality driven, right? But a lot of architects are not personality driven. They're more systems driven because they have other collaborators and partners, and a lot of other expert advice comes into the design. So today the architect is not perceived like a Harvard rogue, right? Where he draws the line and that's it, that's what it is, and it's not so romantic and powerful as that. But today there are a lot of other forces, right? So I mean, you have to kind of navigate through those forces, and a lot of those forces kind of define the way to go to the way forward. So sometimes there's not much room left for your style to be forced into that. So that's why, in that sense, the skill today is also about navigating different situations and coming up with different solutions, right, for different contexts. I mean, that's a lot of architects, a lot of firms are already doing that, and you already see that. I mean, from different scales, you kind of each time is a learning for you as well to see how they've attacked it and how they solved that. So in that sense, it's both. It's again how you honed your skill, I think, on the same kind of work, or how you hone your skill to do different things as well. So
I guess at the end of the day, it depends who your clients are, like Proneet said, and what your program is. You have to adapt to that. You can't just stick to a particular style and say, no, this is what I'm going to do for you. And today you can't turn back clients, right? Just because of that. And if you can work with a new style and if it's within your comfort zone, we believe that why not? And today, if it requires a little more research, like we are working on a project which is very different from what we usually do. We're doing a boutique hotel in Rajasthan, which is a 350-year-old fort. Now, we won that project. We, being people who have being the end user of luxury properties, both Shruti and me had a good understanding of what was required that went into that boutique hotel, went into the design. So we won that project. We did a lot of research and we're open to experimenting. So we're willing to experiment with different styles. It depends on your personality as well.
Absolutely.
And also, I think it takes time, right? I mean, it takes a lot of years and a lot of projects. So, I mean, if you don't play the game, how will you ever get better, So you got to play more to really kind of hone your skill and develop your style or develop a way of working that.
And sometimes you don't know actually when you get a project, the first time you're working with a client, you are understanding them, you understand their requirements, you're catering to that. It's not, I don't think a project is all about us. I mean, it has to have, you have to have that shared understanding.
Yeah.
Okay, Anika, next question.
Okay, so next question is for Rajan.
Yes.
In the quest to create something unique, should an architect compromise on functionality and practicality? And do you think this ever happens?
Well, I think the obvious answer would be that you shouldn't compromise on functionality or practicality. That would be the obvious answer. But, as architects, we have to, we always try to push the boundaries. We try to do something different. We try to create sometimes different designs. And sometimes people have this preconceived ideas about what is the most efficient way of design, what is the best about how practical is a particular design. And, it is not necessary that it has to be like that. People have preconceived ideas. Say, for instance, they have an idea that, a rectangular room will be the most efficient room to be designed because it can fit in everything most efficiently. But I could tell you tomorrow that maybe one side could be curved, or maybe you could have a bay window, and maybe the design could look better. So, we understand what is practical, what is functional, but also we don't stop our creativity out there. So you keep exploring ideas, you keep understanding, that something could work in a particular way, something could work in another way too. It's not necessary that a room has to have 90 degrees. It could be a round room and yet be fine, and it could be efficient enough. So yeah, I think you shouldn't compromise on practicality, but as architects, we do try to do something different, and the boundaries blur out there.
I think it's also important to understand the purpose of the project here. Whether we are trying to create something which is symbolic, give the user a different experience, and whether that outweighs the functionality.
Yeah. So there are a lot of factors which play out here. Absolutely. It depends.
I think again, Rajan, the point about being unique is similar to what we were just discussing about the grades. They were trying to be very, very stuck and disciplined in their way of working.
Right.
And it was not practical for so many clients. When you read up on their projects, on the history of their projects,
yeah,
some faces and shapes did not work for the clients. They became museums thereafter. And people would, visit them, and it was kept alive for many years. But
yeah.
Some architects pushed it too hard.
As architects, that's our job, to understand how we can push the boundaries, how we can, create, get out from that rut of, a typical, design which we've always followed for so many years.
You're right.
Everybody accepts, this is the best way of designing.
I guess if dynamic forms are well rationalized and they can work successfully and make the user, it's an intuitive space. If you can create an intuitive space within a dynamic form, it works well. It served its purpose.
Right.
Okay. For Zubin now, a common problem faced by designers is getting a client who thinks he knows design better than the designer. How do you deal with situations like this?
You're trying to get me into trouble, right? So there's no doubt today that the clients today, they are very well versed with trends, materials. I think your question was more on materials. There has to be some amount of give and take in understanding where they're coming from. The client wants to be involved in some manner, some manner or form while they're building their dream space. We would do everything possible to ensure that we get all their thoughts and whatever they have in their mind out to assess what it is that they're aiming for. I mean, that becomes a very valuable brief for any designer. To have a satisfied client is actually one of the topmost goals of doing any interior design project. Now, eventually, they'll have to be reminded that you came to us to do this project. So you have to remind them that they've appointed a professional. Now, please listen to the professional. I mean, and it's a soft skill. It takes some years to develop. And normally we can get across to the client, without stepping on each other's toes too much. Once that comfort level is achieved, they trust they're in good hands, then we're able to lead the project through without much interference. I mean, we have to also make them understand that though they like certain individual features and objects and elements, it is us that has to incorporate it into their space. So they have to trust us, and bottom line is that we have to gain that trust from them, and that will come with time of spending a few meetings with your client. You will get that trust. So it's a very soft, delicate space to tread in.
But what if their ideas are very tangential to yours, and you're not on the same page at the end of various discussions, at the end of various options that you have given them? Then would you?
Nisha, to answer that, if they are tangential to mine but not to the concept of the space, I'll still go with it. I'll still humor it. They may be tangential to mine but not tangential to the concept. They may be a replacement of my idea, right?
Right. So as your idea means also the concept, right? Today, the concept is your idea. So what if it's tangential to the concept? What if you all are,
that's a no-brainer. That would be a foot down, right?
Right.
you would have to put your foot down to protect your concept in their best interest.
Right.
But there are clients who, like I said today, they're quite evolved and quite educated. They know that they're not talking different languages when they're suggesting something. Now it's few and far apart. Previously, it used to be a bit of a challenge where, you would get very conflicting styles being thrown at you from husband separately and wife separately.
Yeah. No, and today if a client comes to you, they've already done enough back-end research to know what you're willing to offer and what you're capable of and your style is all about. So
that's what I was going to say, that they already have done their research.
Right.
That's true.
Do. So they already know that, they're going to be comfortable with him.
True.
I've heard Hafiz say a lot of times, a good project is 70% client, a bad project is 70% client.
Wow.
Yeah. He
I agree. They are the ones who get the energy out of us, right? So if it's positive, it's them. If it's negative, it's them.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's all about the relationship with the client as well, right? Good projects have good relationships with clients.
Absolutely.
Okay. Right?
Okay, so we'll move on to the next question. The next question is for Proneet. Proneet, do you think that the current municipal regulations impact good design?
Oh yeah, of course they do. So all our set of laws in our city should be to enable rather than prohibit. But when you think of our municipal laws, your basic emotions are of greed and fear. I mean, so yeah, in that sense. So I mean, Rajan will also know. He's working this field as well. But it's also about minimization of everything is about minimization of standards. There's no clarity, consistency. A lot of things are open to interpretation and many times retrospective. I mean, you've seen large projects in Bombay and Delhi that have been well into their construction and then got into trouble because of this whole idea of interpretation. And so in that sense, India becomes, India and all its cities to work now with so much development that it can, that has the potential to have, becomes a very tough place to design good buildings, right? I mean, in the sense that, so everything is graded, right, already. Everything comes down to what is free and what is not. Different cities have different rules. There's no one common standard rule for building in India. So everything is FSI based. So in that sense, it's extremely constrictive, right? So it's very difficult to. So in fact, now a lot of architects are doing better work in smaller cities, B towns, C towns, all of that, than in larger cities. Because there the rules are slightly more open. They still don't know how to kind of really assess those kind of design moves. So in that sense, that's happening. But to do that in Bombay or Delhi or any of the big cities is very difficult. So yeah.
But if you're able to achieve your building in Chennai, it's amazing.
Yeah, we will achieve. We will achieve it, right? But that's the thing. So we have to use. I mean, all of us. But then again, we will achieve it. But again, it's not the real potential of what we can achieve, right? So in that sense, it's a compromise. But again, it's a hidden agenda that we have to be able to achieve it. I mean, anywhere else in the world, it's we wouldn't have had to hide behind these kind of rules and loopholes and do all that. And just state our kind of intention to be able to do that. So that's the basic thing.
Proneet, don't you think, I hear architects talking about this a lot and, involving the council in these matters. Has our bylaws formation committees ever approached any design architect? I don't want to call them. I don't want to.
No. So a lot of the. I mean, even Charles Correa had from early days had given a plan proposal for New Bombay, for Parel. All these proposals have been given with everything worked out for public, private, all of that. But again, that's the whole corruption takes over, and all of this goes out the window here. Everything is also focused towards the builder, right? Towards money. Even for public housing, it's also partnering with the builder, which actually doesn't happen in any other country. So
Yeah.
So in that sense, it's very restrictive to do. To do good work in terms of good design, not in terms of okay, fine. I mean, you can say that this building is good in terms of design in its current constrictive context, right? So in that sense, fine. But it's not. It's not actually good, right? I mean, it's not actually what it should have been or could have been. So in that sense, it's difficult to.
Pronit, I agree with you when you were saying that, it's more difficult in cities like Mumbai and Delhi rather than, the other B-tier cities. Because somehow when in cities like Mumbai, which is the heart of, our country, Maharashtra, in Mumbai itself, the rules are so stringent that your buildings are now eventually looking like MHADA buildings with only blocks and just hajas.
No, so agreed. But now see, there are ways to get around it, right? To be able to kind of still do it takes a lot of skill to do a very simple, elegant building, right? Otherwise, it's just kind of if you just follow the rules, it's crazy. Yeah. So in that sense, it's very difficult to be in to build in Bombay. But there's a flip side to it as well. Now a lot of with the way the markets are going and all of that, a lot of it is now product focused rather than square footage focused. So even today a lot of say development willing to lose little FSI for percentage of FSI.
Yeah.
For the betterment of the product, right?
Absolutely.
In that sense.
We work with developers who have actually given up on FSI just to make a product which has got less density and more openness.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Plus, you have to kind of really navigate. It's almost like dancing, right, with the rules. So obviously we have to be, and obviously we are the only country where we have this whole system of BMC architect, right? Who will handle the BMC for you. Obviously, you're doing all the drawings and all the loopholes, calculations, all of that, but you can't actually deal with that. So, and even though now it's become online, but it's not really online. We all know that. So
yeah.
So it is very difficult. For us, it was important. We thought at that point, with every year we learn. But for us, it was important to kind of test it to see what happens, right? If we do this project, how will we do it? So to kind of just to get more experience in this. And now we are kind of holding back on a lot of the builder projects kind of thing. So we already know the kind of work that will come out and all of that. So in that sense, it is very difficult to really do good design as in the sense of good design, not in the sense of its local context.
Generally, what happens is that you have Mumbai city, and then you have if you go down to places where there's a lot of redevelopment work and there's a lot of, because in Mumbai right now you have redevelopment, you don't have new plots, and it's so restricted. Your buildings kind of look the same. They look different. Yes, you can maybe you color the building differently, you clad it differently. Maybe a builder would like to use a balcony, at the cost of saying, I want, maybe my clients will appreciate a balcony rather than use that FSI inside, and all those things are there. But I just I would prefer it if the entire the people who are responsible in formulating rules would we could all sit together with them and we could understand how we could come out with a better regulation so that
So these rules have actually been formed because of there's been a lot of misuse, right, in the past. There's been crazy. I mean, even currently there are massive big developments in Parel and Delhi all over And they're massive high-end residential buildings where more than half the floor plate is actually illegal, right?
Wow.
They're there. It's all there. So there's a lot of misuse in that. You know, earlier we had buildings where cars were allowed to go on every floor, you know, all of that, and then doing all that. So because of that, it's just been a very reactive, like a hammer down, you know, clamping down on all your on the architecture or what the design is. But if you see now, especially evident now post-COVID, post where everyone is stuck at home, right? Where everybody is stuck at home, where even a small box window, a planter, a balcony, an alcove, things which are not allowed, right? Which are just not allowed to make such a big difference in your everyday living here. So in the
People
sense
spend-
that these rules are now, they were never made for just life or design, right? I mean, design meaning life. They're just made for restrictive greed. You know, that's
Yeah,
what it is.
Mal-
So, but there has been, but then now, of course, there's a flip side as well to it, which is nice because they have RTI, right? So a lot of builders, buildings, private, even if you do a small private building, the builders, you know, whatever, even the big ones. Now there are a lot of corporate builders. So there's RTI involved, and there's a lot of their professional complainers, right? Who will scrutinize your plan versus what is built versus OC, and you know all of that, and get it out, illuminate that. So everyone is very strict to follow that. So that is already happening. So in that sense, it's already kind of lays ground for rules to kind of relax a bit, you know, in terms of allowing certain things, provided it's all counted in FSI anyway. So there are very restrictive rules, like as well as, you know, you can't cantilever more than 2 meters in a building in Bombay, which is like stupid, you know, in that sense. You really get restricted to really make a good space. So that becomes very, very difficult to work with.
But do you think sometimes dealing with some BMC architects, some of the rules get lost in translation or are misinterpreted to architects? Do they face that kind of problem?
So no. For this happens for larger projects. I mean, you've seen large projects in Bombay, right? Bani House, then the other house on Nepean Road, which was supposed to be a museum as well, where it got extra FSI. Palais Royal, Delhi has so many, Chennai has, you know, all of this. So all of this is misinterpretations of larger larger rules,
Right.
which the rules allow to be misinterpreted, right? Which is actually quite contrary to what a rule or law should be. So there's no real clarity and consistency of that.
Right.
So that is what is the thing. And then of course it's very easy to be corrupt with it, right? So but that happens in one-off larger projects. What we're talking about is just rules as a city is. You know, so in fact, it's very, very important. You know, like a DP. A DP is a development plan. DP comes out and is valid for 25 years, right? A lot of this DP lays the groundwork for the building rules, besides the city planning and all of that, right? And that's actually more important than the government that you elect, because the government that you elect is for 5 years, and the DP is set for 25 years. So in that sense, there's, you know, is really, really kind of critical for us going forward to do this. Otherwise, a lot of good designers like yourselves, right? I mean, you guys are just scared, you know. Us as well. We're just scared of doing so many projects, right? Because of what will happen to it, you know. I mean, I don't want to just do drawings and get some money for those drawings, and you don't know what how it'll actually get done. So.
Guys, I'm sorry to interject. I think you're crossing the time. I'll ask the last question to the audience. So this is a ticklish question: is what do you guys do when architects underquote fees to get projects? Who'd like to take this?
So yeah, you really can't do anything. But what we here is something that this is a very hot topic. It's a huge topic in itself. It could have been a separate discussion again. But again, we have no support from the COA or from our other bodies. like IID, IIA, COA. We have no kind of support. We don't even have a guideline of what to quote. Like if I'm working in Bombay today versus working in Jaipur, Delhi, Raipur, Chennai, there are different fees for different zones for the same kind of project, you know. And there's no kind of benchmark set for that as well. Which we find really kind of disheartening. I mean, even auto rickshaws and taxi drivers have a union and they have rates, right? All over the world, this happens. There are rates. It's another thing to have to whether it's being executed or not, whether the law is tough enough to be able to adhere to that. But at least you know there's a benchmark how much above or below you are. I mean, you don't. So a lot of the times I get projects, I call all the architects, I call all the big architects, I call my friends, I call everybody, right? This is the kind of project, this is where it is, what should I quote? And everybody's giving me different answers. Everybody, I have different answers for everything. So I don't have, there's no set figure, right? And the big architects are always quoting less, by the way, the big powerful names.
Oh.
But anyway, but the thing is that, so this is a real kind of thing. And what happens is there has to be a minimum benchmark, right? So at least when we know that there are amongst ourselves, when we know that a client is going to about 5-6 architects or whatever, we just pick up the phone and say, okay, let's not quote below this. Whoever gets it, but let's not quote below this. But that's on a very small micro level, right? But it has to happen on a larger national level. But yeah, you can't do anything, you know, because that's the state of our business.
You know, guys, we look at every project as an individual profit center. We never let one project feed off the others. So we do it internally. We just make sure that we're making reasonable profits from every project that we're doing, you know. And our fees are charged as a barometer of our own self-worth. And, you know, our negotiation room, our rubber band for negotiation is very, very finite. And we let the work go beyond a certain level.
Yeah, agreed. But there should be a minimum. There should be a minimum from which you can't go below, right? I mean, that is a benchmark that's missing.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. I think that's the basic thing that we need. We just need to establish a floor below which you just cannot. There should not be a ceiling. First. Sorry.
A base slab. Yeah.
Correct.
But I guess
you can lose work. You can lose work on a price war, but that war should not have been on a below base level.
Right. And I think even services are varied. Like every firm is not the same. They come with different experiences, a different knowledge bank. Even the extent of time which is given by principals or associates varies from firm to firm. Certain firms, the quality of service will vary. The quality of product will vary. So you can't have a generalized fee structure for all firms. But of course, like Zubin said and Proneet said, there has to be a base you can't go below.
Right.
I think what happens is that, you know, every time you know, you have the fresh architects and you have people who aspire to be successful. There are many who would rather take a project, you know, at much lower cost so that they get an opportunity to make their designs into a reality. And
sure, you buy your projects, right? I mean, we've all done that.
Yeah,
we've all done that, you know?
But I think as it won't be correct to underquote, because I think like at least the successful lot, you know, they should understand that if they do that, then somebody else is going to do that to them eventually. And, you know, we are just being played against each other eventually. So it's like Proneet said, there should be some kind of a base where, you know that, you know, that this is acceptable and anything beneath that is not.
Right.
Okay, we've got Sulli who's coming into the room. Hi, Sulli. You have to unmute.
Is it muted now?
Yeah.
So I think that this discussion is very varied between architectural projects and interior design projects, because the volumes are different, the effort going in different, the personal involvement on a one-to-one basis is very different. So I think we should separate the two on this discussion. And the fees are basically, we have lost a lot of projects to this price war for interior projects. And we let it go and we learn from it and become more competitive and look inside to see how more efficient we can become. And somebody else can do it, so can we. And there's somebody else is delivering equally good quality or equally good quality of work, then we should be able to do that as well. So it's healthy in a way. But the clear differentiation, architectural is a really different animal from interior design, as far as fees are concerned.
No, agreed. No doubt about that. But what I mean, my point was that again, because India has so many markets within the same country, right? I mean, if you're doing a high-end interior project in Bombay versus a supposedly high-end interior project in a B town or a C town, I mean, there's also a perception. There's a perception of valuation, what your fees can be, all of that. So right now, what I'm trying to say is I don't have any benchmark to kind of weigh against that how much lower, or am I okay, or am I really low. Of course, I'm obviously doing that with regards to my own time and input and all of that anyway, right? But it would be nice to actually to have that, and that can be done. I mean, it's not that can't be done. I'm not saying be enforced, but at least be done for everyone to know.
True. I think that would help a lot. I agree with you on that.
It basically depends upon the client actually. If he values you as a designer, he's not going to go to anybody else. He's going to come.
No, but that's, that of course, nobody can argue with that argument. But the point is, it really doesn't depend on the client. It really depends on you. I mean, you, when I say you, meaning as us as a body of designers, right? I mean, we have to kind of at least, the first step is to know your benchmarks. The second step is to enforce it. So we haven't even done the first step, right? We don't know.
I think in interiors there is the benchmark pretty much.
No, it changes, yeah. It changes. The thing is, what we can quote and get fees for in Bombay, we can't quote and get the same fees for in other cities there.
Yeah, that is because Bombay is an expensive place to stay. So infrastructure costs are.
But that's exactly what I'm saying. So India has many markets, right? For whatever the reason, India has many markets. And you're getting work all over. You're doing work all over. In fact, a lot of good work happens out of Bombay for us as well. But we just don't know what the benchmarks are. So that's the thing.
Okay, now we have Vivek Gupta, who also wants to come into the room. Sully, are you okay?
I'm good. I'm done. Thank you.
Sully. Rahul, get Vivek Gupta into the room.
He's in the room. You have to unmute and then speak, please.
Okay, great.
Okay, I don't know if he's heard. I'll move on to one audience question in the meantime. There's one question about how important is Vastu while designing and including practicality in a design.
Well, sometimes your designs are very impractical because of Vastu. That's one more thing that you have to work with, right? So you work with it.
And sometimes it becomes difficult to incorporate Vastu in every aspect of an interior project, especially when you're doing projects in residential buildings when you can't move around a lot of functions. So whatever bare minimum you can follow, you follow. But you can't put a kitchen where a bathroom is and turn around functions which are not going to be practical for the design. So it really depends.
Yeah, sometimes clients are hell-bent on following it to the T, and that becomes a big problem, I'm sure.
It handles the functionality of the space, I think, sometimes.
We've come across clients, who actually, before buying the apartment, who are really followers of Vastu. They just make sure that, the whole apartment which they are buying is Vastu compliant. So, that works better actually.
That's the best way. We've actually been very lucky with Vastu. We've contested it, we've resisted it, but, eventually we've succumbed to it, and eventually the project comes out nice. So we don't have so many issues with Vastu actually. We are seeing that it's kind of somehow making the rhythm of the space nice. So we've just been lucky.
Okay, we'll move to sorry, you were
I
saying?
think Vivek is in the room now.
He's there, but Vivek, need to unmute yourself. Rahul, can you unmute him?
I have sent him the request, but he has to do it from his end.
Maybe he wants to be in the room but not talk to us.
Should we move on to the last couple of questions from the audience then?
Yeah.
Okay. So one question we have is that most people use social media platforms like Instagram and Pinterest to look for inspiration while building their homes. Do these platforms influence your work, and how? Anyone wants to take this question?
Yeah, not at all actually, because I think eventually when you design something, it has to be your personality. So, as a platform, all these social media platforms, it's okay for the clients and everybody else to understand what are the options possible and different styles of design. But when you are designing, I think if you start following other people's designs, then you're not going to become original, and you're just going to lose yourself somewhere. So you want to do your designs, how you believe they should look good. I think that's the way ahead.
But do clients usually pick up pictures from Pinterest and be like, I want it to look like this and please make it look like this?
Well, they do that. They use it as a tool for communicating what they're looking for, their likes, their dislikes. So I think we can use it as a tool for communication between the client and us. You don't have to take from it, but you get a fair idea of what direction the project might take because you understand their choices better.
Like what they're looking for, basically.
Soft skills which Zubin was talking about are in play out here when you have to convince them that you want to do something different apart from the Pinterest image which a client has shown you.
There's basically 3 boxes that you need to put your clients into. Unexposed to design. These are the easiest for designers. They are willing to trust you blindly and just allow you to guide them. Enthusiastic and exploring, these are the ones who are going to be checking it out there. This also helps the clients and designers' language get sorted out easily. It's nice. And then there's the confused and the enthusiastic.
That's the most dangerous. Confused.
This type of client is the most difficult to handle. Yes. They tend to get even more confused with their own overload of references. They confuse themselves with their own references. They're contesting one reference against the other. So you've got to first judge which of these 3 is your client, and then attach yourself to that project accordingly. It can't be a singular rule.
Yeah, you play your field accordingly, I guess.
Exactly.
Okay, last question, Anika.
Last question. I think we have a few designers who are just starting out and they're looking for advice from you all on anything that you all can advise them on how to begin, how to start getting clients if they want to enter a new city. Someone is specifically asking about Delhi in case any of you all know.
Yeah, so I think that, a lot of people working in our offices, a lot of students who've come out, young architects or young designers working in our office, they don't have the full range of skills, when we came out of the office, of our schools, and when we started, right, and I really started from scratch like everybody else, is that you have to have, at least to start with as a basic, you have to have a full range of skills. You have to be a one-man office. You have to do everything. You have to sketch, you have to communicate, you have to draw, you have to sell, you have to go to site, you have to do everything. Right, and that's what you learn. In your education and in your work experience, to be able to do that, and only then can you be capable of actually venturing it out into kind of running your own practice as well. Obviously you won't do that in your practice, all the things, but you need to be able to do that, and that's being illuminated all the more reason now that we are all stuck at home doing our things, kind of work and getting things done. So that's very important to do.
I guess that's
Couldn't agree.
it's important to work in a small or a mid-sized office where you can round up all these skills, right? When there are fewer people,
Yeah.
and more responsibility rather than being, in a larger office. Of course, it's
You cannot learn at the client's expense. You have to get your skills in order. I could not agree more with Praneeth.
absolutely.
I think there are no shortcuts basically. So for all the newcomers, it's you got to work hard to achieve that dream which you are dreaming. There are no shortcuts. It's not going to happen overnight. And if you try to do it, you'll probably fall flat on your face.
No, also the thing is you have to be quick, right? I mean, when I say you have skills, is you need to be lightning fast, because you're pitching, you're showing ideas, you have to manifest your ideas, to sell, you're selling. So the more you play, the faster you play, the easier it'll be for you. And that's important. That applies to us as well, right? I mean, it's happening at every stage of your career. At different
But
stages.
for all successful architects, I think your philosophy and your idea of design, it actually happens over time and over a lot of hard work and over a lot of design. But eventually, and you believe, what you do is a good architecture. So I think shortcuts. You have to go through that grind. Keep designing, keep working till you find that. Eventually.
And it's
think
also
sorry.
it's also very important for them to be technically sound before they start off on their own. Because it's not only about design and romanticizing and fantasizing about design. You need to know how things are done, how things are carried out at site. So it's very important to be technically sound as well.
I think Vivek is in the room. Vivek, are you with us?
Hi. Just, yeah. I've been hearing everybody, wonderful chat. Everybody showed great works and everything. Through the conversation, there were various things that I was chatting, and I was, Zoobs, that ISM was isms, and I was talking about isms normally. So there are architects who have a design philosophy, and they keep on mastering that. And then people would gravitate towards them for their design style and flair. Normally that ism is realized or recognized post that architect is gone, including Bava in the latest scenario. When Bava was alive, I don't think he had the kind of aura that he had. He had, of course, he was known as a nice contemporary architect, but the aura, the ism that has come about Bava's work has come about now. So, and then Nisha was interjecting about whether we need to go on adapting to the client's need. In fact, if you don't have an ism, then obviously all projects that we design are always collaborative in whether it is design philosophy or it's the design intent or the aspiration of the client or the aspiration of an architect. I think that's the nature of our work. And then taking up on both Rajan and Praneeth, which is very, very significant in the sense that, somebody like me who's who's studied and imbibed Chandigarh, which is completely, you were talking about bylaws. I'm grown up in a city and studied architecture in a city, which is even a facade control. So my question to both of you is that, is facade the only architecture? Why should we look at, in fact, it's the easiest to change the skin of the building. Rajan can give me any design and Praneeth can give me any design, and I can change the look of the building by having a new skin, which is the facade. Why do the Bombay architects harp so much on your purchase of FSI? Purchase as in design purchase from the FSI. How does really, we should build within laws, whatever. And I think it's an equal opportunity game for everybody. Then why the buildings cannot reflect the discipline of the bylaws?
No, the buildings do reflect. Right now, the buildings are reflecting the discipline of the bylaws, whatever that might be. But the grievance is that there's no room for real design, right? That's what it is. So, for example, if you talk about just a simple Bray Soleil, right? I mean, it has a certain depth that is needed, and that's just not allowed. That's just not allowed. Right. So how do you do? So you can't do you're building in a tropical climate. You're building a residential building, say.
Right.
But you cannot do a very simple sun shading device here, so it's not allowed. So that is what is restrictive, right? And that's far as Bombay is concerned, right? I mean, not other cities.
Yeah, so Pranit, there only I'm saying, so there is a purchase that the FSI purchase from the design perspective is how you recess some parts. Not every part of your room, not every part of your opening does require a brisole or some kind of a shading. So the purchase happens in the sense, so that is what will
So
give
basically
you an automatic blocking.
So I understand that. So basically you're buying that space, right? You're buying that space in terms of, say, it'll affect, say, 5% of your building area will go into buying that space, or whatever. Some buildings can afford it, most buildings cannot. Also because the cost of construction versus also the cost of BMC, official and unofficial, are just so high versus land costs and finance costs. So the costs just go into a different zone itself here. So, I mean, we have done buildings where we've taken the whole columns and shading devices out, which work much better for taller buildings than smaller buildings, because with respect to shear wall areas reduction versus area that's counted outside, all these kind of calculations, right? Because you have to kind of justify financially as well your design. So, I mean, up to about 2.5% max, about 4 to 5%, you can buy these things. I mean, you're buying it, right?
Yeah. So, but buying, what I meant, Pranit, was buying from the design point of view, not from money point of view. As you barter some areas which you protrude out, and some area that you take in. The net area is the same without real purchase of any in terms of money transaction.
No.
That's what I meant.
No. I know what you're saying, but it's not like that in the rules. If you have a window, right? It's not that I have a window in some area and then do a brise soleil there, and then I can compromise or adjust that area somewhere else. I can't do that. I'm not allowed.
So what it is tantamounting nowadays is to create
I can't do that. So that's the thing, right? So there are different ways now. I mean, every architect or every designer then comes up with his own kind of ways to deal with that. That almost becomes like his secret sauce or something, in this municipal environment. But even then, that's just okay. That'll be like a design that's elegant, simple. It's nice. It's okay. It's not really good. So that's
so really good optics, you mean, or really good design?
No, in terms of design, forget optics. Optics is up to optics can be done in like 6 inches, right? I mean, with money. So I'm not talking about optics. I'm talking about just design. Design in terms of livability, just amenity spaces, your simple livability of your house, windows, all of those things here. So we've done a couple of projects like that, but we know the challenges that we faced in those things. Also, the goalposts keep shifting, right? Every couple of years. The rules keep changing. A building that I did 5 years ago, I won't be able to do today. Right? So
no, I've been in a building in Bandra where, as you were saying, that the car park was on the 17th floor. I mean, we were doing 17th, 18th, 19th floors there in Sandhu Palace in Pali Hill. And I know there was no man's area. The area
now,
was supposed to be a
if you say Sandhu Palace, that's an example of a pure manifestation of municipal guidelines with respect to only pure greed of taking every square foot. You don't even have proper chajjas. Forget design, right? Forget design. We're not talking design, but at least simple protection chajjas on windows. And it just looks like a $1 million slum. That's what it is. So I'm just saying, in terms of design, just as that. So, I mean, I would like to do, I mean, if again, that's up to there again, he did not even spend that 2 to 5% of buying certain things, right? To make certain windows, protection, light quality, all these things. Those things don't matter in that building, That's just pure FSI, maximum money. That's it.
So my last question on that is that so don't you think us architects, when you also spoke about product-based projects, whether it's a superior product, pure design-based, rather than FSI or area-based, then we should be pushing that as the way
But
forward
that
for
is,
good
that is
architecture.
that is exactly what is happening. But that also depends on the builder itself, right? I mean, say this building that you mentioned would have been product based.
Mhm.
There are other buildings that we've done in the area as well in Bandra, or we're doing currently in other cities that are purely product based. And that's how you convince the clients, right? I mean, that's what we're not convinced, but that's also the way to differentiate. They also know the market, yeah. So it comes down to that. I mean, today the buyer is also very discerning. No longer can buildings or houses just be warm shell square footage that you're buying, right? Because there are so many. So you know, in fact, we can use that to our advantage now from design point of view, right?
And do you think sustainable features should be made part of the bylaws?
Of course, yeah. So what happens is that earlier you could do that. So imagine a building like Kanchenjunga, right?
Right.
The most amazing building in the world. I mean,
Absolutely.
imagine all our residential buildings could be like that,
Yes.
right? But because of misuse, right, and also at that time when Kanchenjunga was built, they really did not have an idea except the architect. I think 30, 40 years ago, it was easier for architects to build those kind of buildings. I mean, Mr. Korea himself would not be able to do a Kanchenjunga now. You know, it won't be allowed unless, I mean, you're buying all that area, right?
Right.
So the thing is that, I mean, you have to kind of see in what context the laws are, and also because of misuse, all these things were misused so badly. So it was a very kind of reactive constriction that the law put on. So all the onus has come back onto the people. It's not that I'm upholding the law or the law is strong enough. That's not happening. Right today, the fire laws for even a small building are so much. It's almost like, you know, I'll buy my own fire engine and park it in the building.
Right.
Like that. So but now the flip side is now because of RTI and all and there's and using the corruption in the right way, right? You know, because you fear the corruption because someone complains against you, the kind of money that you'll have to spend, you know, all that. So that makes it very that makes it everyone to adhere to the laws. So in that sense, now is the time that we really can change that. And post-COVID as well. I mean, you know, if I were to be in a $1 million a house which has no balconies, chhajjas, no proper light, alcoves, you know, these kind of things, it doesn't
These
matter.
features need to be added, of course.
Yeah, so these things make a big difference.
Okay, guys, we are way beyond time. This has been our longest ever webinar. Longest ever.
Wow.
Thank you, guys, so much. Thank you so much. It was
Thank
Thank you.
amazing to have all of you over.
Vivek,
Thank you
it was long because you spoke so much.
And finale by Vivek.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Anika.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Everyone,
Bye,
thank you
bye.
so much.
Guys, see you all soon. Hope to see you all soon.
Yes.
Bye.
Great
Bye.
chat, guys. Thank you. Bye.